Welcome to our weekly 3-minute therapy podcast. And I'm Dr. Michael Edelstein. I'm a clinical psychologist and author. And I have as my trusty co-host, Mick Berry, who is also an author and an expert on, as am I, on REBT, Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy, an approach to therapy devised by the brilliant Albert Ellis in the 1980s and has garnered much popularity since then. And we talk about issues, usually emotional or behavioral disturbance related to problems that people have in their daily life that tends to subvert their happiness. And when they have these emotional behavior problems, it usually comes from a certain type of thinking about situations. It's always our thinking that causes our emotions, not situations themselves. And the main thinking that causes emotional problems and behavioral problems is thinking in terms of demands: must, should, supposed to's, have to's. There are three main demands. I must do well and get approval, or else I'm no good. That leads to anxiety and depression and guilt. You must treat me well, or else you're no good. And that tends to lead to resentment, hostility, and anger. And then the third demand is a demand on impersonal conditions, not on the conditions, not on people, but on the conditions of one's life. And that normally takes the form of my life must be fair, easy, and hassle-free. And if it's not, my life is awful and tends to cause depression as well. So the solution is question, challenge, contradict your demands, and show yourself there's no reason things or people or situations absolutely must be the way you want. You don't run the universe. And show yourself that desires, preferences, wishes, and hopes make sense. I prefer to do well and get approval. I prefer you treat me well, and I prefer my life go well. But there's no reason it has to be that way. So that is our basic theory. Mick, did you want to add to that?
No, I think that covers it.
Okay, and today we're going to be discussing a problem I came across with a client that I was unfamiliar with, and that is media addiction. So again, an addiction or media, we're defining as things like being addicted to Facebook, to the news, to LinkedIn and political sites. So this client was addicted to those things, and he used it as an escape also to escape work he had scheduled to do that he wasn't doing. So I helped him by helping him identify his demands, his musts and shoulds, and helped him learn to question those demands and do it in the form of an ABC exercise, which I also called a 3-minute exercise, where at A is the activating event or the situation. So a typical situation he was in was he had the urge to uh, check Facebook. And then his irrational belief about that is, I absolutely must satisfy my urge. I can't stand the frustration of not doing so. And that led to C, his emotional consequence, which was acting on his demand, which was to spend a lot of time on this media, social media, and waste a lot of time and avoid doing the work that he had scheduled for the day. Mick, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, nothing other because I didn't um, work with them, of course, but I find it interesting that somebody would have this problem. However, I do know that I myself can waste time looking at things online when I at best be doing things to take care of myself. I know that there is a term, an acronym. Are you familiar with the term FOMO?
I've heard it. No, what does that mean, Mick?
Fear of missing out.
Ah, yes, I think that's very relevant to this.
Yeah, and uh, it's so easy to think, oh, there's something on Facebook I have to catch, or I'll scroll down and see what's next. I'll scroll
Yeah,
down and see what's next.
exactly.
Most of it is meaningless and unimportant. I think it's safe to say that there was a science fiction writer, Theodore Sturgeon, when he was confronted by somebody who said, I don't read science fiction because 90% of it is crap. His retort was 90% of everything is crap. So, there is this idea that there's something relevant that I'm missing, but the truth is most of it is unimportant. And most of the stuff that even makes it so far as to being published into a book is unimportant. Some of it is, but most of it is unimportant. And it's so easy to think that, oh, I have to catch what's up. I think that when it turns to an addiction, there's a demand going on that I absolutely must not miss something. Whereas, you can miss something. It's okay.
Yes. And there are some other additional demands that this client had, such in addition to I must not miss out, such as I must not miss something important. And if my friends are aware of these things, I have to be aware of it. Also, I must escape boredom. That was a big one of his. I must escape boredom. And if I uh, do my documentation, he had documentation to do for a job. If I do my documentation, it's going to be boring and I must not face the boredom. So that's another one.
Yeah, I think within the phrase fear of missing out is um, the understanding that missing out on something important. I don't think people would worry about missing out on whether or not a blue jay flew by somebody's window. Um, in any case, it is very easy to procrastinate and get involved in other activities because our tasks that are best for us to do, work and cleaning up or whatever it is that is best for us to do, can sometimes and often are unpleasurable, but they are beneficial in the long run. So we want to opt for long-term hedonism, as Albert Ellis would say.
Yeah. And long-term hedonism uh, means that if you face a difficulty for the moment, then you could get more pleasure in the long run because you do what's difficult, what promotes your life, and then you could relax at some point and have some more enjoyment. So there is something to be said to, in a reasonable way, to using or looking at social media, enjoying social media, but it's good to do it in a measured way. And a few ways you could do that is one, set goals with rewards and penalties, which is one of the things I helped the client do. So he would, his goal was to spend 8 hours on his work. And then if he did that without going to social media, then he would give himself a reward, such as um, reading a book that he wanted to read or uh, eating some food that he liked, those kinds of things. There's another technique called the Pomodoro technique, which is uh, for every half hour, you take 25 minutes to do the work. And then at the end of 25 minutes, if you've done the work, then you take 5 minutes to do anything at all that you would like. Yeah, Mick?
Yeah, well, and also, I'm a musician, and in practicing, you can only depend on your concentration for so long. So it's a good idea to take a break from a task and just forget about concentrating, and then you can come back after 5 minutes or so and concentrate better. So, and in fact, I know one drummer who's extraordinarily great. He practices for 4 hours a day, but he says he usually doesn't go longer than that because he isn't able to be very productive beyond 4 hours of concentrating, which is just constant work. So I was going to say, I remember Albert Ellis one time in a speech saying regarding people who are practitioners of REBT, we are hedonists. And included within that is long-term hedonism. And I would describe myself as a hedonist, and many people would say, well, that's kind of crazy. How can you be a hedonist? You hardly drink at all. You're a vegetarian, mostly vegan. Why do you say you're a hedonist? People have this idea of hedonism as being just indulgent and going with pleasure no matter what it is. But if you are actually a thorough hedonist, that would include long-term hedonism and doing things that are more pleasurable in the overall scheme of things.
Right. Yeah. Also, some other practical approaches you could use to media addiction or any addiction actually is Premack's principle, which was devised by a psychologist named David Premack. And what he said was do the let the higher frequency behavior or the lower frequency behavior reinforce the higher frequency behavior. Let the lower frequency behavior reinforce the higher frequency behavior. So the lower frequency behavior is something that you tend to put off. You don't do it that frequently. The higher frequency behavior is something you easily do. For example, have a cup of coffee. So don't allow yourself to have the coffee until you do the 4 hours of drumming practice or whatever you want to do that's more work and not as pleasurable. And then you can have the cup of coffee. So that would be a Premack's principle.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we've covered it all more or less. I did want to say one thing about the word addiction, though, because it's thrown around a lot. And if we're talking about somebody addicted to alcohol or addicted to drugs, then it's something that's physically harming your body. And generally, the best method of dealing with a, an addiction that's a physical substance is to abstain from it completely. But what do you do when somebody says they're addicted to food? You can't say you're going to avoid food altogether. So this takes some maneuvering to engage in the activity rather than just completely refrain from it.
Yeah, so that's a good question. And I think we did cover that many podcasts be, ago when we discussed addiction to food, and that is the most common addiction, I believe. So what you do when you're addicted to food is you decide what foods are important for your health and what foods are not important to your health, and you allow yourself to eat the foods that are important for your health, and you don't eat the foods that are not good for your health, like potato chips or cotton candy or other candy or things like that. So that's one way to deal with it. Similarly with alcohol, you have to drink, but you take certain things that you drink and you decide that's that's not allowed, and you don't drink alcohol, but you still allow yourself to drink water or other healthy drinks. Okay, so I think that much covers it. And I'd like to thank Chris Rossini, our tech engineer, and comment below if you had thoughts or questions. If you'd like to volunteer to be a guest, and we have a guest coming up in a couple of weeks to discuss sleep, and give us a thumbs up if you like this or got something out of it. Suggest subjects for future podcasts, volunteer to be a guest, and I'm Dr. Michael Edelstein, clinical psychologist, and I'm with Mick Berry. And subscribe to the 3 Minute Therapy podcast to do what, Mick?
to stay on the rational side of life.